Thank you, Heather, and good afternoon, everybody, or good morning if you're on the West Coast. I am so pleased to be introducing our speaker in this topic today for our webinar. Billy Williams is the Vice President for Ethics, Diversity, and Inclusion at the American Geophysical Union, and he has been working on this topic of harassment and workplace climate for several years now, and it's been a wonderful collaboration between AGU and other societies and other organizations. So I'm going to ask Billy to take it away from here.
Okay, so thank you, Pranoti, and good afternoon and good morning to everyone on the line. So I'm proud to and very pleased to be presenting to you today on this very important topic. As you see from my title, I'm involved with AGI ethics programs, and some of you, if you're like most people, you don't typically gravitate towards ethics topics or ethics programs or ethics leadership. If you are like me, you would not have naturally gravitated towards this. In fact, when I was given responsibility, asked to spend most of my time on this, I reflected back on a scene that's in the series on Netflix, House of Cards. And in season number 1, episode 2, the senators were conspiring to see how they can punish someone. And so there was a senator that they wanted to punish. So they said, let's give him ethics. That'll fix him. So ethics isn't something that you would typically gravitate towards, but I think in this case, we have gravitated towards as we have actually started some things that I think will have very serious, very much needed impact. And we're doing it through collaborations with a lot of other groups. So hopefully today I will share with you some things that are going on, give you some tools and information that can help you in your own institutions. So next slide, please. So for today's discussion, I will hit 3 items. The first is how we really got to this point. You know, why are we doing this? Why is there so much emphasis in this arena today? We will spend the majority of our time talking about what's been happening in terms of driving change, the collaborations underway, the new resources that are available for you, and the recent attempt by AGU in our policy update to redefine harassment as a code of conduct issue that can be addressed within scientific societies. So there are some new things there that I want all of you to understand, because we believe it will have impact and will have implications for our work in the geosciences. The last item I want to share with you is more of what I think might be new information for all of you, but I think it's something that you'll be interested in and might benefit from in your own home institutions. And it's a program called Athena, SWAN, and Sea Change. So we'll spend some time talking a little bit about that as well, because it is related to our work climate issues. And I think you will, if you haven't heard about it yet, you will certainly hear about this program going forward. So next slide. We don't need to spend a lot of time talking about what's been in the news over the past 2 years. I think you're all familiar with a lot of the very public cases involving harassment and indeed sexual harassment in our academic environment. So we won't need to talk through these every month. There are 2 or 3 additional headlines or 2 or 3 additional items that are brought to our attention. So you don't need to go search for these. But this is really what started the conversation within AGU. We started in December of 2015 with a town hall meeting to discuss this topic and what should we be doing? What is the role of scientific societies in having to address this issue? Some of these, the majority of cases we were seeing were happening in academic communities, but we asked ourselves, is there anything we can do, whether it's AGU or other scientific societies can do or should be doing to help address the issues? And that's some of the things I will talk to you today about were the result of that initial conversation. Next slide. So as a result of that workshop, that town hall meeting in 2015, AGU joined with 5 other societies, with AGI, AAAS, American Chemical Society, the Earth Science Women's Network, and and AWG to sponsor a workshop. This was funded by the National Science Foundation. So this was only 1 year ago. So it was September of 2016. And the topic of that workshop was what is the role of scientific societies in trying to address this? So is there a role, or is there, what are the leadership expectations, not only in scientific societies, but across our agencies as well, and in working with the academic leaders in helping to address the issue? It was a very unique workshop. There were 60 participants. It was by invitation only, but it had this unique mix of academic leaders, scientific society leaders, and government agency reps, and included leadership from several of the scientific societies to just start the dialogue. So I would say that was the major starting point for us in terms of this broader collaboration and what we hope, what we anticipate will be a change in culture across the geosciences if we're all bonded together, subscribing to the same principles to help address harassment and other work climate issues in our sciences. Next slide. So you might be sitting at your institution and you may be wondering, okay, so what is the role of your professional societies? What can we do that's different from what you can do in your own institution? And we subscribe to what's listed here. There's some things that we, the professional societies, are in position to pursue more aggressively than you might be able to pursue within your own institution. And certainly you are in charge of setting your own work climate, but we can do some things to help reinforce what we think would be a positive work environment. We can help educate through workshops, through sessions at meetings, scientific meetings. We can put items into code, and for example, this recent update to the AGI ethics policy is us codifying really what we see as a higher standard of expectation for what is acceptable behavior in our scientific community. We can also help enforce some of these standards. There may be cases within the academic community where if there are issues involved, it has to go through so much legal tangle or hassle that it might be several years before these things are worked out. But within our own professional society, because the rules, we set our own rules, we can set what we will enforce in terms of standards of behavior for our membership or for anyone who participates in our programs, whether you're a member of this particular society or not. So we can help enforce the codes or standards. We can also help provide training, again, through our various scientific meetings. There are always opportunities to help educate and train. We can provide support for any targets of harassment, and we should not forget this because this is needed as well. We can support research or provide additional data to serve as structure for additional research to help inform and provide new substance to deal with these issues. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to now talk about some of the things that have been on the way. I will spend a little bit more time talking about the update to the ethics policy within AGU, because this is very recent, very new. It was just approved last week, but it does have implications for any of you who might participate in AGU programs. So across the Geosciences, this time last year, as a result of the National Science Foundation workshop, we crafted collectively, the members in that room, including all the societies represented and the academic leaders, a document called Organizational Principles for Addressing Harassment. And we've been in the process of disseminating those high-level principles for the last 12 months. And if you have not seen a copy of this document, I will tell you where you can find a copy, or you can reach out to Pranoti or me or even Chris Keene and ask, and we can certainly make sure you receive a copy of these organizational principles. There's some very key things that are stated there, some very minimal things that should be in place. For example, if you run field camp experiences or conduct field research, there should always be a code of conduct for any participants in those programs, very visible codes of conduct. So That first item, the organizational principles, we think are very solid. It's not prescriptive. It sets a standard that we hope you can look at, read through, and see where your organization can close the gap between these principles and the way you might be operating today. There is also a task force operating from AGI, and AGI is the central organization or umbrella organization for more than 50 different scientific societies in the geosciences. So as part of that task force, we're working towards adopting some consensus harassment statements. So AGI can't force statements on these societies, but it can put what we consider to be consensus statements in front of different societies to make it easy for them to sign off on or adopt themselves with their own modifications. So that is work that's in progress, is close to completion. So I think that will be a giant step in terms of having to set the standard for what's to happen in the geosciences. There is also a National Academies Committee in place on addressing harassment in academic STEM. I have the privilege of being part of that committee. That committee was launched, I think, in January of 2017, and we anticipate the work product from that to issue in June of 2018. There are also several bystander intervention workshops that have been spun up and are now being promoted and are available. We've sponsored a couple from AGU. I know some other groups are working on similar programs. So what we hope to have is sort of a catalog of these workshops that are available, so that if you're in your own institution and would like to have one of these sponsored, it would be easy to find, easy to access, and easy to schedule. Okay, next slide. So again, our recent program emphasis here, beyond just the collaboration on the things that we have done inside AGU, have been these harassment sessions and education sessions on work climate. But the most visible items, I think, that have been picked up by the media have been the updates to AGU ethics policy. So let's talk a little bit about that. Next slide. So if you haven't been paying attention, here are the things that you would want to know. There are about 5 or 6 items that I will just lay out to you as what the key changes in the ethics policy that people should be aware of and pay attention to. Some of these we think will generate or have already generated some public debate, but we welcome that debate because we think it's healthy to get these issues discussed in public. For a long time, the issue of harassment has been sort of known but not spoken, and we're at the point where we are promoting each organization, each group, each institution to really have public dialogue, a dialogue amongst yourselves on what is going on and how can you help address these. So this first change in the ethics policy is that we have redefined our definition of misconduct to include misconduct towards others. So inside the AGU scientific misconduct definition, harassment is included. So if someone is a victim of sexual harassment or has been damaged by sexual harassment, there's an opportunity within the AGU code of ethics to pursue this or have it addressed through our ethics policy. We believe that alone will have a big impact in terms of not so much to police our membership or people who come to our programs, but at least make a public statement about what's acceptable. The second bullet is related to the first. As part of this, the honors program for honors and recognitions in AGU, which includes all the awards that are given, scientific awards, and the AGU governance participants. These are people who are elected to positions to lead a section of focus groups or committee leaders. Will have to abide by the code of conduct standards. So up until now, in most cases, when the awards committees are discussing scientific merit and and whether someone will be awarded some scientific honor or given granted fellowship or whatever, that decision has been made strictly on the traditional scientific merit. You know, how have they impacted the sciences? Are they pushing back the boundaries? How are they, you know, what's the publication? How are we setting new paradigms for our sciences? Without any regard to other items that might be occurring where there's a negative benefit to our sciences. So in the new AGI ethics policy, the code of conduct implications are there for any of our awardees, and we can decide or factor that in for any AGU candidate for an award or an honor. The third item is also important because this policy update takes us into new territory in that it can apply to actions that occurred outside of AGU programs if those actions harms another AGU member or may bring harm to AGU's mission or reputation. And so there's some examples. I'll talk to you about some examples that probably gives a little bit more substance to that. So someone behaving badly outside of AGU programs can also be sanctioned potentially under the AGU ethics policy. All right, next slide. So the final three, so for the honors programs and for the governance, we are planning to use sanction self-disclosure. For example, if you're nominating someone for an award within AGU, as a nominator, you're asked to at least check the box to say that you're not aware of any potential sanctions or code of conduct issues for the person you're nominating. And also the awardee would have to check the box to make it a self-disclosure of any sanctions. Not all sanctions, but it would be very specific in terms of what we're looking for. And not all sanctions are disqualifying. So don't be afraid that if you self-disclose, you're no longer eligible or candidate. It's very similar to conflict of interest self-disclosure. We do this now. In all of our honors and awards, you have to disclose conflict of interest, and the fact that you disclose it means there will be a discussion about it. It doesn't mean something is disqualified. The other change, other item here is that there are statutes of limitations described, but what it describes is that each case is considered, each is a case-by-case consideration, and there is no absolute statute of limitations. In the middle box, you will see that in the future, we will make the AGU Ethics Summary Report more broadly available to AGU members. So we've had an ethics program in place, a strong program in place for the past several years. And as part of that program, we provide an annual summary report to the AGU Board of Directors. The report does not contain any names. It simply lists how many cases were brought forward, how many cases required some investigation, what the nature of the cases were. There might have been 2 plagiarism cases, 1 data case, maybe 1 code of conduct case. And the disposition of those cases. So there's nothing here in what's disclosed to board, and now it will be disclosed to all AGU members, just to let people know that we are active in this area, and we've had a certain number of cases. They have this type, and here's the disposition of those cases. Whether dispositions, whether they've been closed or still in progress, or what the nature is. And we think disclosing that also helps reinforce the fact that these things are being followed up, and they're not just being hidden in a drawer someplace and we don't address them or discuss them. The final item I think is the most important, because when you have a new policy, one of the initial reactions might be that, oh, we're trying to police folks, so how are you going to do this? And that's not the purpose of the new ethics policy. The new policy, the updated policy, the purpose is to set a standard, have it standard to be known, and then to follow that up with additional education and resources to help support the environment that we want. So again, don't be concerned that with the new policy, AGU now becomes the ethics police. That is not the intent. In fact, we don't have resources or intention of becoming the ethics police, but we really are about trying to set and communicate the standards expected of all of our members. So next slide. So let me just give you 3 boundary case examples that might help give you some sense for how the policy would work in practice in case you're sitting there wondering or worrying about it. So I'll give you 3 quick items. Next slide. So this is an example of a case where someone may have done something outside of AGU programs, but AGU ethics policy would apply. So in this example, the AGU member was sanctioned by a home institution for conduct or inappropriate behavior. The target requested AGU to ban this person for the meeting that she would attend because she was concerned about being in the same room with this person. So under our policy, AGU, if it chooses, it can act under this policy to ban the person in the meeting or take other actions. So the decision on what would happen is decided case by case. So the fact that the request is there doesn't automatically mean it's going to happen, but it means that this behavior is now covered in our policy, whereas before it would not have been covered at all, and that would have been limited discussion because we would say, oh, that happened back at your institution, that doesn't have anything to do with us. We feel badly for you, but sorry. And that's not the case anymore. So this is an important change for our policy. Next slide. This is an example of another case where something may have happened outside of AGU programs where our ethics policy would apply. So let's say a scientist has been found guilty of research misconduct by a federal agency. Let's just call it misdirection of research funds. That sometimes happens. So let's assume that person is being nominated for an AGU award. So this sanctioned self-disclosure would kick in case no one else caught this or knew about it, because a lot of these things do, most of these things occur on a confidential basis. There's no real way to know everything that's going on within home institutions because they, by necessity, are handled as a highly confidential item. So again, this case would, our ethics policy would cover a situation like this with sanctioned self-disclosure. And again, if someone has been brought under sanctions and are not disclosing it in a case where they're being nominated for award or a medal or for any other honor, then that's even more evidence to suggest that person, that some action should be taken. All right, and next slide. So this is a case that has to do with statutes of limitation and what might happen if somebody's been sanctioned, but it happened 20 years ago. They've done restitution, nothing, you know, but it's been leaked to the public. And so now what do you do under this policy? So in this case, sanctioned self-disclosure would apply. There are no statutes of limitation. But again, this was handled case by case. So again, there's no prescribed remedy for any of these cases. Everything that happens in our ethics arena is handled case by case. They're also handled on a highly confidential basis. Only those people with a need to know, and there's a very few, so it's probably a limited handful of people will ever know these things are being investigated. What the actions are, which actions are being taken. Unless there might be a case where something very egregious has happened, and as you would want to make a public statement to say, this is what we're doing about this situation. Okay, next slide. So other actions in progress, I've mentioned a couple of these, but there are one or two I want to really hit on. So you saw that we're also starting a more aggressive stance here to address diversity and inclusion in our AGU programs. That's included in my title, as you may have noticed. And I'll talk towards the end about the Athena SWAN Sea Change program and how that rolls into all of this. SafeAGU is a program where we support, provide support and a safe environment for anyone who might be dealing with issues related to harassment, especially. We sponsored a bystander intervention workshop for the USGS last month, which had great feedback and great success. We have a workshop scheduled at SEG annual meeting next week, the bystander intervention, where we use, on these workshops, we are using not just volunteers, but expert facilitators to help get the points across, but also we make them specific to our geoscience environments. There is a Stop Harassment Workshop website. And the last item is something that's in progress in AGI Ethics Center, where we could help provide work climate surveys, sponsored research, online tools and resources. And I will say you should stay tuned for more on that, because that is a work in progress. And next slide. So SafeAGU, if you were not aware, that was a campaign, or it is an ongoing campaign to demonstrate support for inclusive environment, and it's most visible at our fall meetings or at any of our AGU sponsored meetings. Last year, the staff members or people have had some training or wearing the SafeAGU button, and we are planning that again this year for those who have had some training in how to support people who may have been victims of any type of incident, whether it's harassment or other incidents at our meetings. The next slide is the Stop Harassment website. That's a resource center. The website URL is there. That's also the place where you can find this the draft principles for organizational address of harassment is at this website, as well as many other resources. From this website, we also link out to other websites that exist that have great resources as well. So we're just trying to be an easy to find central repository for information that you might find useful in your own work environment. Next slide. So this ethics center concept, so here's the deal. It is one of the things that's been recommended and has been approved by the AGU board to help provide additional resources, as opposed to saying we're just going to have an updated ethics policy. This is more about providing resources for our members and for our scientific communities that can help drive towards this cultural change that we so often talk about. And there's a list of items there, workshops, webinars, assessment tools, surveys, other things. The last item there is the one I want to talk more about. That's this plan to have best practice awards and public recognition for organizations, departments, and individual leaders who are out being proactive, have great work climates, are doing all the right things. So if you're doing these things, why not get some public recognition, some award for this? So before I move in to talk about Sea Change and Athena SWAN, which is really the items highlighted at the bottom, I just want to say there are also things that you can do. If you're on this call, there are things that you can do as opposed to things that our scientific societies can do. So we need more senior leaders to step up and be active and be proactive in this arena. I think the fact that you are on this call shows strong interest, and that's very, very commendable. So when you go back to your workplace, if you haven't done it already, just talk with your work group about what's happening in the sciences on these issues. And it's broader than harassment. It's the whole work climate issue in terms of civility. How do we treat each other? What is our standard of conduct? What is okay? What is not okay? And don't be afraid to speak out when something is not okay. The other thing we can do is, I think it's important for us to not feel like we are alone. Working in this arena can be a very lonely space, but I can say the thing that keeps me going is that there are other very strongly active partners out there that I've been working with who have the same desire to see a culture change. And I can tell you there are many, many folks out there of the same ilk. And so through the network we formed and through you attending workshops or attending sessions like this at our meetings, you can find yourself aligned with like-minded people and give you more information, more resources, more support to help change the environment. So with that, let me go ahead and talk about the next slide, which links back to this ethics center concept. So next slide. So some of you may be familiar with Athena SWAN. Athena SWAN is an existing program in the UK, and what has emerged is it has been so successful it is starting to spread across the globe. There's a pilot program built from Athena SWAN in Australia, and that program in Australia is called SAGE, S-A-G-E. The similar spin-off program that is evolving in for the U.S. and Canada is called Sea Change, and that program, this program, is being housed or hosted currently at AAAS. But AGU has been partnering with AAAS over the past few weeks to see how we can help involve geoscience departments in this effort. So next slide, I'll tell you quickly about what it is, what it looks like, and we'll throw this open for questions. So the background on Athena SWAN is focused on advancing equity and diversity in colleges and universities. It's been in operation for 12 years in the UK. It is based on having charters or gender equity charters or racial equity charters. And if you sign on, then you're signing on to endorsing those principles expressed in the charters. This program has expanded from 10 institutions in 2005 to 143 institutions in 2017. So more than 90% of the academic institutions in the UK are now part of Athena SWAN. It's voluntary. This is not a government-run program. It is totally voluntary, but the benefits people see are in this evidence-based approach. It's built on qualitative and quantitative research, and it's based on the work that you're already doing, but you track it and you measure it, and as you achieve certain milestones, you get public recognition for this. Next slide. So I've said some of these things already. The program also provides training, a lot of resources and research to help support the efforts. And again, the public recognition of the results. It's a big deal. And in the UK, at least one, maybe two of the funding organizations have tied their funding for the research institutions to whether or not they're involved in Athena SWAN. So again, Athena SWAN is voluntary, and it's not that you will not get funding if you're not part of the program, but you get preference. So there's some preference you receive if you're part of the program. And I think that's what we know that is what has driven this rapid growth and participation in the UK, and it's why it is expanding so broadly. Plus, the results they see, the testimonies from the participating institutions have been so strong, very, very strong. But there's a lot of work involved in gathering the data to support the metrics that are needed to make the program really work. So next slide. So in the US, the program, so this is Athena SWAN US version or North American version. It's called Sea Change, and I can tell you what that acronym stands for, but it's hosted at AAAS. It emerged out of discussions and started in 2015. There's a pilot program in place currently with 10 participating institutions. A lot of the institutions that are currently participating have been in the NSF Advanced program, so they're already collecting data. And so this is not something new for them, but the reporting and of the information and the structure for it is important. For Sea Change in the US, it will focus on different definitions, different measures than in the UK. So intersectionality will collect data on disabled, so gender equity issues, so a lot of things that the UK program will not focus on, the US program, at least in the pilots, are focusing on. There's been preliminary funding from NSF for a workshop, and some funding from private foundations. And next slide. So again, I won't go through all of these, but there's a pilot underway. There's a workshop coming up in October of this year, 19th to 20th, I believe. The current pilot programs that AAAS are running are focused on institutions. The full college or university is being assessed in its program, in its work climate, in its environment. So how is it doing in its hiring and its pay equity and everything else across the full institution. But Athena SWAN in the UK also has a program for recognizing work done at the department level. And that's the portion that's missing now from the US program. And that's the portion that AAAS is engaging AGU with to see if we can get started on the pilots for departments. So there is an opportunity, there's a need to start bringing departments along. And if you are interested at all in this or participating in the Athena SWAN or the Sea Change pilots, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or reach out to contacts at AAAS to get more information. There is a white paper on Sea Change that's available, and we'll make sure that that white paper, we get it posted on our website as soon as possible as well, so you can pull this down and take a look. And I believe you will find it very compelling. Almost everyone that is exposed to this concept says, yes, let's go do this. This can change the game. So I'm excited about Sea Change. I'm excited about what it can mean for our overall work climate, for our environment in the geosciences. And next slide, I think with that, I will close out and just say we are here to work with you, whether you're representing another organization that you want, that we need to collaborate, whether you need workshops, whether you, you want to help explore what more we can be doing. Just don't hesitate to reach out to on any of these listings here. So I think that is it. Next slide, and we'll throw it open for, turn it back to Heather to facilitate any Q&A.
Great, thank you so much, Billy, for that wonderful presentation. We do have a couple of questions coming in through our chat box. We're going to start with one. We have the president of the Society for Integrative and Comparative Biology, and they're developing a meeting code of conduct policy for their annual meeting. And their annual meetings have around 2,200 attendees or so, and approximately half of those are students. So aside from developing standards and workshops on appropriate behavior at our meetings, they have concerns about being judge and jury on issues that come before them. There is the possibility of opening officers and the organization to lawsuits as a result of the sanctions that they might impose. So this individual was wondering if you could discuss the balance between the need to enforce the sanctions and the protection of the officers or the organization.
Yes, thank you. That is a great question. It's one that we've had in the past. So anything we do in this policy, and I would encourage any organization that's considering updating its policies, especially if you will have a strong policy, should be reviewed by your legal counsel. And anytime we're considering a case that might result in potential sanctions, then our attorneys are there side by side with us to assure that we don't have any missteps. But with that said, I will say there's just some basic things that should be done that should not require any second thoughts about getting yourself into legal trouble. If you have a meetings code of conduct, then you can describe what's the standards of behavior at that meeting, and since it is your meeting, you have the right to dismiss anyone from that meeting for cause without worrying about legal retribution. So that's a start. But if you get to the point where you're dealing with something that might represent, that might be in a legal parameter, sexual assault, things like that, you should have an attorney there, and it's best for those cases to go through legal channels, and then based on those results, there may be some things, some actions you might be taking at the same time. In many cases with an AGU, the questions we get are those items that do not rise to a legal standard, where people are looking for some relief, some acknowledgement, some action to be taken that that an attorney does not have to be involved in at all. If someone wants you to, for example, the request to, can we stop this person from coming to a meeting? That's not a legal question you should be worried about. So I hope that helps, but I'd be glad to have further dialogue with you, or have you put you in contact with our attorney on this to give you more confidence.
Absolutely. And what we can do is share Billy's contact information with the registrants if you have any questions. So if you do have any questions that you'd like to speak with Billy privately about, you can go ahead and shoot us an email, and we will send that on to Billy and connect you. You can reach us at workforce@agiweb.org, and I believe Billy has his email address up somewhere as well. Our next question is along the same lines as that. How does AGU vet the harassment practices and history of its own officers?
Ooh, that's a good question. So
it is a good question.
Well, I think the answer is this: we'll do a better job of vetting it going forward than maybe we have in the past. So I would be very surprised if within the past AGU officers that they have all had a squeaky clean track record. But again, we're not out searching for past bad behavior. What we're focusing on now is setting the standard for future good behavior and promoting the positives going forward. But the new policy will help address what we have in place for AGU officers in the future.
Fantastic.
Hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And given your updated ethics policy, will you now include some language in your contracts with meeting venues about the ethics and harassment policies?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that does happen now. I mean, that already happened in the old ethics policy, but the old ethics policy did not have enough teeth. But yes, for all of our vendors, they are made aware of the ethics policy, and they're expected to abide by the same standards. And we do know of cases where at meetings, vendors, some vendors, not all, and even not even most, but some vendors have been known to have actions that are harassing in nature. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. Now, did the working group consider professional misconduct, that term? Did they consider that as an alternative to the term scientific misconduct?
Yes, we did, but it was very deliberate that we chose to define this as scientific misconduct because of the impact it has on the science community and entire scientific careers. And just calling it professional misconduct, we didn't think made enough of a statement, had enough of an impact. Because it's something that's addressed on the side and you can deal with it or not. If you call it scientific misconduct, then we can take actions versus our scientific honors, for example. So yeah. it was consciously decided to address it in this way.
Absolutely, it was a stronger statement, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Now, in the voluntary sea change program, are there consequences for institutions that have cases of harassment or that become poor environments for gender equity in the future? For example, post recognition as a sea change institution or an award level, and can they be delisted? What about if the institution takes appropriate disciplinary action against the employee? Does that jeopardize their sea change status, or how do you envision that working?
So the way, I think the thing that happens on sea change is once you're at a certain level of performance, you have to recertify, reapply every 4 to 5 years. So it's not like your grandfather in that I'm at State University Y, I'm operating at sea change gold level, and I'm good for the rest of my life. You have to reapply and recertify and demonstrate your performance on a regular basis. So I think that would address most of what you're asking in terms of how harassment cases or how you handle ethics cases within institutions, that's only one measurement. There are multiple measurements that will take place at institutions, and you can advance by being proficient in one or more areas. You don't have to be at the highest level in all areas to advance. So again, it's more of helping people to see the best practices and help us advance together. It is not a competition between institutions.
Right, absolutely. Now, AGU has some good anti-harassment policies, but they seem to only apply to the AGU members. How would you, as non-AGU members, be affected by the AGU policies?
So if you're a non-member, but you're participating in AGU programs, then you are covered. If you are, and I think that's the main item. If you're a non-member and you're not participating in AGU programs, then you're covered if there's an AGU member that's causing you problems. So there are two answers to that. One, if you're a non-member participating in the AGU program, our policy applies. If you are a non-member and something happens that's caused by an AGU member, then our policy applies. Again, we're not trying to set a standard that we can take this and apply it almost anywhere and everywhere. It's more of these are the standards that are important for AGU, and it's global. It's a global standard as well.
Okay, so what happens if the person is within the scientific community in the geosciences, however, is not a member of AGU and is also not participating in any AGU programs, but is clearly potentially having problems within the community in general? How does the AGU policy help this situation? Is that something that could go back to the AGI anti-harassment statement that you had mentioned earlier, or how would you deal with that?
Yeah, I would say, unfortunately, in this case, the AGU policy would certainly not cover it. If it's one of the associate members of AGI, then perhaps their policy would cover it. So it really has to be covered in the institution where it exists. And I think that's the. So this policy is not a blanket coverage for anybody anywhere. It's more for AGU members of AGU programs. The AGI statements, I think it's more of a statement of principles that we will see coming out, but individual organizations will adopt their own versions of a policy similar to AGU.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you for that clarification. One more question is coming through. If I'm at my own institution, how can I arrange to get a bystander intervention workshop at my own college or department? How does that work?
So you can contact AGU, contact me, and we have a couple of paid facilitators that we can arrange, depending on their availability, to come in and conduct the workshop. I can say that currently, because we are using expert facilitators, there is a charge. We don't make money on this. There's a charge, and it covers the cost of expert facilitators. But I will also say there's some other work in progress through an advanced grant to generate some additional bystander intervention workshop resources to be conducted by volunteer scientists. And in those cases, there probably would not be a fee involved. It's just minimum fee to cover costs, travel costs, and other things. But currently, if you contract through us, then you're paying for an expert facilitator. You're getting, a world-class, first-class workshop, and but there's a fee involved.
Okay, great. Thank you for the information. Right now, those are all the questions that have come in through our chat box. We do have a couple more minutes left in the webinar time slot. So if you do have any other questions that you'd like to ask, feel free to type them in, or alternatively, as a participant, you can click the little raise your hand icon that's right next to your name. And if you have a microphone, we can unmute you and you can speak directly to Billy and have a conversation. Oh, we do have some more questions coming in. That's fantastic. This is a clarification question. Is the bystander workshop different from the staff training for the SafeAGU program?
So Heather, I'm not sure if you asked a question because I was disconnected briefly.
Oh, no.
If you did,
okay.
can you please repeat?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a clarification question that came in. Now, is the bystander workshop that you were just discussing, is that different from the staff training for the SafeAGU program?
Yes, that is quite different. It's very different. Staff training for the AGU, for the SafeAGU program, is more of teaching our staff members how to respond in certain situations where they're being asked for help. Bystander intervention is when you observe something and you would know what to do to provide help. So there's some relationship, but they are different.
I see. So the bystander intervention training is, it sounds like it's basically helping participants build those skill sets to be able to know what to do and be able to act in certain situations.
Exactly. It's done usually through practice. You can recognize it in the environment and know how to intervene and how to redirect something that's going on. So it gives you confidence in standing up or not just, in a lot of cases we see something or hear something and we don't know what to do. We just kind of turn our head or walk away. I think bystander intervention will give us more practice and confidence in speaking up.
Great, fantastic. Now, are there whistleblower type protections for the victims who complain? And what about for the accused during the investigation period? How does that all work?
So again, we treat all cases in a confidential fashion when they come into us. I think our policy does address whistleblower protection but now you're getting into legal territory, but there is language in our policy concerning whistleblower. But for someone coming in with an accusation or a claim that's being made, then again, we treat that in a highly confidential fashion, and unless the target wants to disclose what is going on, we certainly do not. And I think there are legal concerns if you start disclosing things that have not been proven.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Now, do the AGU staff do the investigations or do you hire someone outside?
No, AGU staff is not involved in the investigation. We facilitate the process and make sure it's done properly. We have attorneys involved. We have, in some cases, depending on the nature of the case, we have some expertise, some people with expertise appointed to investigate depending on the nature of the allegation. So AGU staff members, we might be involved in gathering initial data to present to the people who would investigate, but we do not conduct the investigation.
Okay, wonderful, good to know. Right now, those are all the questions that have come into our chat box. We do have a couple more minutes left. I will open this up for more questions. And again, you can use the raise your hand icon if you'd like to have a conversation with Billy about this. And right now, I don't see anybody. We will leave it open for a little bit longer. If there aren't any more questions, what we can do is turn it back over to Pranoti for some closing announcements.
All right, thank you, Heather. If you could just turn to one slide back, where it was showing Billy's email address in case people are interested. Is there a way for you to go back? There you go. So for the individuals who wanted to get in touch with Billy, you can see his email address. You can certainly write to him if you have additional questions. So thanks, Heather, for that. Now you can move forward. Thank you. So thanks, Billy, so much for a wonderful presentation and for answering some great questions that came in through the audience. And I want to thank everybody else for coming to today's webinar. As Heather mentioned before, a recording of today's webinar is being made, and when it is ready, you will get an email notification if you registered or even came to the webinar. So you can please feel free to disseminate that to your colleagues or your university administrators.